All right, let's go. So you've got your template, which you've cut out from the pattern, and you've got some lining fabric, a 20cm zip, and then I've also got this Cath Kidston laminated fabric for the outer. The first thing you're going to do is cut out your pattern. So we're doing 2 layers at the same time, which is a bit stiff getting these pins in for the laminated fabric, and we're going to cut that out. And then we also need exactly the same amount for the lining. Now you might find, if you're not using a laminated fabric, that you want to interface the outer fabric just to make it a bit more stiff, so it stands up nice and boxy, but the laminated fabric and the lining is fine by itself. And I've just got a normal cotton for the lining. Anyway, cut out 2 of each. Let's get started on the sewing. So lay one main piece with the right side facing up and the long edge on the top, and then you're going to lay your zip with the right side of the zip facing the main fabric. So I'm just going to turn that over like so, and if it's slightly longer, just center it, and then over the top put your lining fabric with the right side facing down, and you're going to line up the top edge of all of those. Now, because I'm using the laminated fabric, it's really thick for the pins, so I'm using these patchwork clips, which are really great, and actually with zips they're a really good idea to use anyway. So we're just going to sew along the top of there. I'm going to put a zipper foot on for this. Okay, so now it's sewn. Open it up and check that the zip is the right way for the main fabric, which it is. That's really great. But you can see that this laminated fabric is really bouncy, and to be honest, I don't want to top stitch it because it's really hard to top stitch laminated fabric and get it looking nice and neat and even. So what I've done is I have just top stitched, it's kind of like understitching the lining to the zip, so that holds it nice and flat, and then I've got this roller, this seam roller, that I'm just using to sort of help create a bit of a crease in the laminated fabric, just to help it sit properly, and I think this is going to be enough. So now I'm going to do exactly the same as we did before. So I'm going to lay the main fabric with the right side facing the zip. Now the zip has all of that attached, and then lay the lining fabric over the top. So I've got this little sandwich with the zip inside, and center everything up so everything lines up. And I'm just going to use my clips and then sew this along the top edge, exactly what I did before. Okay, so I've got either side of the zip done, and I'm just going to do that understitching thing that I did before. So this is just sewing the lining to the zip. It just helps it lie nice and flat, and again using the seam roller, which if you're using laminated fabric at all, it's a really good tool to have in your toolkit. So now we're going to rearrange it so the main fabric is facing the main fabric and the lining is facing the lining with the zip in the middle, like so. So right sides should all be facing each other, and we're going to sew these sticky out edges but not the squarey corners, and we're going to leave a gap in the lining for turning. So first of all, make sure that your zip is open halfway. You're going to need that later, and then line up all your pieces as best as you can. And I'm using clips on the laminated fabric, but I'm actually just going to use pins for the other one because I prefer it. I find the clips can be a bit heavy on lighter weight fabrics. And don't forget that you're going to want to leave that gap in the middle there. So we're just going to sew that with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So everything is sewn on the main fabric. There's my gap, and I still have these corners all open, so I just sewed the sticking out edges. And now you're going to take each corner one by one, pull out the edges, and match the seam in the centre. So I'd like to keep my seam allowance open for this because it helps it lie nice and flat. Again, grab your clips to make it nice and even, and you're going to sew along this with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and you're going to do that for all of the 4 outer corners. So it can be a bit tricky to manhandle if you've got a stiff fabric, but just work it until you've got it nice and flat and even. And it's a bit easier to do for your lighter weight fabrics because they will behave a little bit better. They don't want to go where they want to go, like the laminated. So again, put your seam allowance open and just match up that seam because it will give a nice neat finish in the end. And then clip it and repeat for both sides. And then sew all 4 of these corners with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So now you've done that, it should look something like this. So you've got all your corners done, and now we need to look at the centre bit by the zip. So you're going to do exactly the same. You're going to pinch the corners together, open up your seams. So now you've just got your zip end sticking out between that, and then you're going to pinch your lining corner to match it up. So you're pinching both together. So you've got your 2, and you're going to sew those all in one piece. So pin those or clip them. And then you're just going to sew across there, catching all of that. Be careful of the zip end though. So I've done one side, and I'm just going to snip off the end of the zip so it just reduces the bulk, and then we're going to go to the other side. Now this was the open side of the zip, so you want to place those together as you do it, with the centre being where that seam is. So match that up, take a bit of time and match that up really well. So I like to get that all perfectly in place as best I can, and clip that in place and do all of that before I work on the lining side, and then I can get to the lining side, flatten that out nicely and just add it to what I've done and just rearrange my pins or my clips. So just make sure everything matches up. And this is going to be a bit of a awkward wrestle to get it under the sewing machine because there's a lot going on here, but just go for it. And then once you've done that, again, just trim off the edges of your zip, and if you've got any sticky out bits here, just give them an extra trim. But then you're going to, I like to smooth out the seam allowances just of the laminated fabric. I'm not too worried about doing it on the lining fabric. It just sort of helps it sit better. And then we're going to reach through, all the way through, and turn it the right way out. And this can take a little bit of time. It's a bit tricky to do this, and there's no way of actually sort of telling you an easy way to do it. It is just get it done. And this is actually sped up, and I cut bits out so you can see how long it takes to get it right. It's worth taking a bit of care just because you don't want to rip your lining fabric as you put it all through. Right, once you've got it so it's sort of inside out, then you might want to open your zip a little bit more and just ease it all the way so you're the right way out. Stick your fingers in onto all the corners just to get it really nice and boxy. Get those corners nice and squared off. You can see now you've got these lovely, neat, no raw edges, apart from this hole that we're going to do, and you can just fold the seam allowances inside, catching any stray threads. And you can either sew this up by hand with a ladder stitch, but I always think life's too short for sewing up these types of holes by hand, so I'm just going to run across this seam with the sewing machine just really close to the edge. And that's the last step, so push that lining back into your little pouch, and there you go. One super cute little pouch that's actually a really good size for carrying about and makes a really good gift as well.